Crest fans. 3 weeks in the books, and some things are starting to become apparent with a few of the teams. Hopefully, for some of those teams that are struggling, they can turn it around. But let's take a look at the matchups for Week 4. So the first game on the docket is 3-0 Walla Walla, the only remaining undefeated team, against 2-1 Roanoke. So the Wallabies are still undefeated. They'll now face the highest scoring team in the league. That is the Rebels. The Wallabies edged past Guinness last week, ran their record to 3-0, thanks to the combination of Le'Veon Bell and Des Bryant, who combined for 321 points. And their defense that has been 350-plus for 3 straight weeks. Coach Maddock bounced back from a poor Week 2 showing and throttled the Zebras, 1220 to 705, with a perfect lineup for the Rebels. 8 different players scored in triple digits, making them the top scoring team overall and the top offensive team overall by a mile. They're scoring 732 points per game on offense alone. The bye weeks are now upon us, and for Walla Walla, it's going to eliminate Andy Dalton and Julius Thomas. The Rebels are going to be without 5 players this week, most notably running back Marshawn Lynch. This series has been a close one over the years, but the Rebels have ripped off 5 of the last 7. But it was the Wallabies who came out on top in 2013. Again, last year, Walla Walla 742 to 640 over the Rebels. Lifetime, this series sits at 9-8 in favor of Roanoke. Game 2 features the Morgantown Moose Knucklers at 2-1 against the 1-2 Kaloa Killer Seahorses. Now the Moose lost a heartbreaker last Sunday to the Dukes, 815 to 760. It was their first loss of the season. This week they face a Seahorse team that ranks 4th in scoring, but has one of the highest points against in the league. Kaloa did manage to notch their first win though last week, 969 to 768 over the Buddhas. Coach Romaine gave away a winnable game on defense and special teams as Kai Forbath and linebacker DeQuell Jackson each had 125 on the bench. They were keys in the Morgantown loss. Kaloa, they got big production out of their passing game. It was Andrew Luck, Michael Crabtree, and Julio Jones combining for 533 last week. That carried the team. Kelvin Benjamin was also on the bench with 175, so this team can throw the ball. Now this week the Moose are going to lose A.J. Green and top linebacker Brandon Marshall to the bye, and with linebacker Ryan Shazier out with injury this week, they're going to be scrambling to the waiver wire to find somebody to start. The Seahorses don't have any bye week losses, and their starters are all healthy and ready to go. The Moose can't buy a win in this series, though. The Seahorses have feasted on Morgantown, 7-1 over the last 8 meetings. In fact, Kaloa has been 925 plus in 5 of their last 6 games against the Moose. It's hard to believe the Moose once led this series 8-4. Last season it was Kaloa 938 to 762, and lifetime Kaloa now leads the series 11-9. The third game up are the defending champion Niners at 2-1 against 1-2 Guinness. As good teams usually do, the Niners find a way to win close games. They won last week 757 to 753 over the Head Knockers. Now they face a tackler squad who have actually outscored the Niners so far this year, but they fell 877-800 to the undefeated Wallabies last week, and that dropped them to 1-2. The Niners were very fortunate that they got a big game out of Jeremy Maclin last week. He gave them 204 and 155 from free agent acquisition defensive back Kyle Fuller, as no other player on their team, bench or starter, topped 100 points. Guinness was never really in the game last week. Their team played soundly, but their defense is getting worse as the season goes on. Last week, it cost them the game. The bye week's going to take Bobby Wagner off the Niners, but more importantly are the injuries to Brandon Marshall, Mike Wallace, Jamie Collins, and Eric Berry, all of whom are questionable for this week. Guinness loses their top wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders, and their top 2 defenders, Larry Foote and Dante Whitner, a pair that they just can't afford right now with their defense playing so poorly. For whatever reason, the Niners tend to struggle against the tacklers. Take last season, for example. The Niners posted 12-31 against Guinness, and they got topped as Guinness put up 1389. Last season, again, it was Guinness 1389 to 1231. Lifetime, this series sits even at 5 apiece. Our next game features the 2-1 Kearney Colonels against the 0-3 Biscayne Stanimals. The Colonels find themselves in a three-way tie atop the West following their narrow 803 to 792 win over the Dragons in Week 3. Now the schedule appears to ease up a bit as they welcome in the 0-3 Stanimals, who are coming off of a 679-568 loss to Manhattan. Despite the record, Kearney has to be a little bit concerned as they're a middle-of-the-pack scoring team with a defense that scored a league-wide low 160 in Week 3. For Biscayne, their promising start in Week 1 seems like a distant memory after a pair of sub-610 performances the last 2 weeks, dropping them to 0-3. Worse yet, Coach Danley's best lineup last week could have won them the game, even though it would only have totaled 735 points. Kearney is going to be without starting quarterback Russell Wilson and starting linebacker Emmanuel Lemur, but more importantly will be the status of wide receiver Calvin Johnson, who's nursing an ankle injury. They need him back in the game. The bye week is a little more difficult for Biscayne. They're going to lose Monty Ball, Larry Fitzgerald, Wes Welker, and Reggie Nelson to the bye week, so they're going to be a little bit undermanned going into this one. These two teams love to run up the score on one another. In fact, the winning team in this series has been 925 plus in 3 of the last 5 games. Last season it was Biscayne 874 to 830. Lifetime it's Biscayne 3-2. Next one, we're going to find the 2-1 Milwaukee Buddhas against the 1-2 Monongahela River Dragons. This is an old rivalry. The Buddhas and Dragons square off here. It's an Eastern Division clash. These two teams have been meeting ever since the very first season of the league. The Buddhas lost their first game of the season last week, 969-768 to the Seahorses. They were the first team this season to score more than 655 points against the Buddhas. The Dragons lost a nail-biter, 803 to 792, and fell below 500 on the year. The Buddhas had 5 players score 85 plus last week, but their leading scorer, Phillip Rivers, only had 109. They were simply overmatched by the Seahorses. Coach Maddock made a huge last-minute blunder as he benched quarterback Nick Foles and went with quarterback Cam Newton. That error cost the Dragons the game, and it cost Newton his roster spot. Milwaukee's playing through a tough bye week with the losses of Giovanni Bernard, Isaiah Crowell, and Jeremy Hill, in addition to the injured Noshawn Moreno. It's just gutted their running back situation. They also lose Demarius Thomas, James Laurinaitis, and Earl Thomas to the bye, so they've got a lot to make up for with this bye week. The Dragons also lose their top 2 running backs, Andre Ellington and Zach Stacy, to the bye, but the rest of the team should be available. No team in the league dreads seeing another team in the league more than the Buddhas fear seeing the Dragons. Milwaukee has lost 5 straight in the series. They've never won back-to-back games against Monongahela, and they're 0-4 lifetime in the playoffs against the Dragons. Monongahela notched win number 20 over the Buddhas last year. It was the first time in league history any team had recorded 20 wins over another team, and it was followed closely by Jericho, who got their 20th win over the Buddhas in Week 12 a little bit later last year. Side note, the Dragons have averaged 990 points per game against the Buddhas in their last 7 meetings. Last season it was the Dragons 984 to 957 in the regular season, and the Dragons 1143 to 701 in the playoffs. Lifetime Monongahela 20-6 against the Buddhas. Next up, we have the 2-1 Dukes against the 1-2 Zimbabwe Zebras. You got to hand it to Coach Marcus. His team has struggled this season, but they've improved every week. Following a hard-fought 815 to 760 win over the Moose last week, they find themselves in a tie atop the division. This week's opponent is Zimbabwe, who have struggled to score, and they got blown out last week by the Rebels, 1220 to 705. Durham broke 800 plus for the first time last week, thanks to 145 from Tony Romo, Adam Vinatieri, and DeAndre Levy. The Zebra defense was pitiful last week. They only put up 170 points, and their stars, LaShawn McCoy and Vincent Jackson, seemingly took the week off. Of course, against the Roanoke onslaught of points last week, it likely didn't matter. The bye week's going to eliminate Percy Harvin and Carlos Dansby from the Dukes options, but more important is the injury to Jamal Charles. This could be significant because backup Niall Davis is on the Zebra squad, so whichever one of those 2 running backs comes out of this could determine the winner in this game. The Zebras don't have any significant bye week challenges, but linebacker injuries to Jarrell Freeman and Thomas Davis could be an obstacle. Zebras have struggled in the series, but they've won 3 out of the last 5 in recent years. Whoever hopes to win this week, though, had better score a lot of points, as the winner in 6 of the last 7 meetings between these two teams has been 9-15 plus. Last season it was Zimbabwe 947 to 771. Lifetime it's Durham 10-6. The last game on the docket, 1-2 Longwood against 1-2 Manhattan. The Head Knockers gave the defending champions all they could handle last week, but in the end they came up just a bit short. 757 to 753 was the final score. Next up, they face a Manhattan squad coming off their first win of the season. They hung on to beat Biscayne 679 to 568 in a thriller. Coach Merriweather made just a single error that cost him the ball game as he turned over a starting position to rookie wide receiver Sammy Watkins over veteran Anquan Bolden. This is a decision he may struggle with all season with the inconsistency of rookie wide receiver Sammy Watkins. The Mantas haven't scored more than 750 yet this season, and injuries and underachieving players are killing the solid play of quarterback Peyton Manning and wide receiver Michael Floyd each week. Now the Mantas are going to have to play without quarterback Peyton Manning, without running back Terrence West, without wide receiver Michael Floyd, and their top defensive back Cam Chancellor and starting linebacker Vontez Burfict due to the bye. Not to mention the loss of running back Mark Ingram to injury. 2-2 is looking like a real long shot at this point. The bye week is not a major concern for Longwood, but injuries to Ryan Matthews and C.O. Moore could hamper their effectiveness. The Mantas got the better of Longwood in 2013, but making it 2 straight with their bye week losses could be asking a lot. Last year, Manhattan 806 to 567. Lifetime Manhattan is obviously 1-0. Good luck to everybody again this week. We'll see you next week.